Alright, welcome back to Tactical Pontoon. We're going to be doing another tuning session with HP tuners, and we're going to go back to the SRT4. Now, just kind of a brief history lesson on the SRT4. Going back to 2003, if you didn't already know, this car dropped a bomb. It literally took out Honda, which was that was the big name. If you had a Honda SI, I mean, they had just dropped their new SI with 200 horsepower, their 201 horsepower, 2.0 four-cylinder, very quick car for its time. I know I'm not a Honda guy. I wasn't a Honda guy. However, when that thing dropped, I was pretty excited about it. Fast forward a few years, 2003. Bam. Dodge drops the SRT4. You're talking 215 horsepower, turbocharged, intercooled, in a car that weighs less than 3,000 pounds for less than $20,000. They were insane. This thing was running 5.5 seconds 0 to 60. And at the time, the only thing that Dodge had that was quicker than that was the Viper. Was the Dodge Viper. Think about that for a second. You're talking a sub $20,000 car that's running with Corvettes of the time, Camaros of the time. I mean, I remember seeing people, teenagers, their dad had purchased them an SRT4. Huh. At the time, I was in my 20s. I would have killed myself in that SRT4. I own one now. I probably wouldn't have owned one for very long back then because I got in enough trouble with my my standard neon. So I couldn't imagine, I hope some of those teenagers are still alive if they didn't blow it up. They really were not some of the smartest cookies in the package. I can remember talking to them about wanting, one of them wanting nitrous and whatnot. But anyways, times have changed. That's been a few years ago. That 5.5 seconds, while still enough to surprise more than a few people, is not quite going to cut it anymore. And more than likely, you've moved on to a larger turbo. But if you have access to HP tuners, then you have access to running that big turbo with the factory boost control, which is actually a very good option for you. That factory boost control has a few neat little things which will allow you to maybe get a little bit more traction off the line or, limit boost in a certain gear. I know it does with the factory turbo, and the factory turbo, as small as it is, needs that boost control in order to allow you a little bit more traction off the line or to limit it in certain gears. So anyways, let's go ahead, let's jump inside, and I have basically a factory tune loaded up. To start out, we're going to hit the torque management tab and the supercharger, turbocharger boost control. What you're going to want to do with the factory tune, or your version of the tune, take from 2.3 volts to 2.8 all the way across the board and put that at 200 pound-feet. What this is going to do, this is going to start giving us a baseline. Put that at 200 pound-feet, close that window, and, oh my goodness, go to the turbocharger tab. First up, we're going to look at the Wastegate DC by RPM table. This is where we're going to make most of our changes. But to start out, to get our baseline, we're going to highlight the whole thing. We're going to put 0.95. What this does, this basically shuts the solenoid and gives you spring pressure on your wastegate. This is baseline. So start by doing that. Close this out. What we need to do is we need to zero out all of these excess tables. Just zero them out. All these excess wastegate control tables, they just need to be zeroed out. More than likely, they're just going to stay zeroed out on a big turbo. This stuff is not anything you're really going to use with a large turbo setup. At least, not something I normally do. Get all these guys zeroed out, which will allow it to pass through. Especially the part throttle adjust, which really doesn't matter with the larger turbo because you really should not see much in the way of boost depending on the size of your turbo. Alright, now that we've got that done, the next thing we're going to look at is this little section over here, the boost torque limit. Most of this stuff should be 967, which is the max the computer will see. The engine coolant temperature one, I would leave it alone. We can 967 it and come back. That one, really, if you've got an issue with your coolant system, then really you need to be looking somewhere else other than your boost control. EGT, it's already 967. RPM, yet again, I would 967 this one, especially if you have raised your boost limit or your RPM limit. Time and boost, that's 967. That vehicle speed, this is something you might want to come back to. Make yourself a boost profile by speed. I know with the factory turbo, I have done it back before the boost by gear table was open. I was able to actually limit my boost and build myself a boost profile. Give myself a little bit more traction off the line. But to start out, we are going to get everything, 967, because what the computer does is it is going to use the lowest number. So if you have 960 pound-feet of torque in this area, but in another area it's 200 pound-feet of torque, it's going to read and accept the 200. It's going to give you the 200 pound-feet of torque. So it's going to go on the lowest number. By turning these to 967, we are just getting it out of the way. The long term, we're going to leave that alone. Fuel pulse width, we're going to leave that one alone as well. Alright, here's where the meat and potatoes comes in. We're going to go back to the wastegate DC RPM. It's at 95. This is going to hold the port on the solenoid closed, which will allow the wastegate to see manifold vacuum or manifold boost pressure. Depending on what your wastegate is, it's going to open at that 7 or that 8 psi, whatever it is, or start to crack at that. So, you'll save this, You'll download it to your car. You'll go out and you'll boost. You'll go give it a couple passes. Normally the computer needs about 3 or 4 good passes for it to start to learn the parameters. So go out there, figure out what you're boosting, and that's when you're going to come back and you're going to start messing with this. The one thing I will say, I love HP tuners, but I data log my SRT4 with an InTune. You can use an InTune, you can use a Trinity, whatever you can get your hands on. Mine's actually a locked InTune that I bought for like $75, $50, I can't remember. I use it specifically for data logging because it data logs more values than HP tuners. Right now I have it just set to look at our wastegate actuation. So you're going to go out, you're going to flash this to your computer. You're going to go out, you're going to data log a couple pulls. You're going to watch your manifold absolute pressure and check and see what you are boosting at. Once you get that, once you get what it is boosting at, you're going to look at that RPM, and to make this as simple as possible, we're going to block this out. We can do math, we can kind of get an idea what the mass airflow pounds per hour is by the turbo, but in order to make this as simple as possible, let's say the turbo is boosting at wastegate pressure from 3,500 or let's say 3,900 to 6,100. It's doing what you want, but you're only getting 8 psi and you want 15 psi. So from this area all the way out, you're going to subtract 20.20%. All right. Once you've done that, you will flash that, save it to your car, go out, and do another pull. Depending on what that pull nets you, you can come back and add more boost. Once you get about 15 psi, or if you're looking, let's say you're looking for 25 psi, and you get up to 20 psi, that's a 5 psi difference. What I suggest doing after you've done this is the initial, right in here, this block out, this is going to give you your base, okay? To fine-tune it, we're going to come back to turbo desired torque. You've told the computer 200 pound-feet of torque is that 15 psi or that 20 psi. That's your baseline. You can fine-tune it now via this guy. So 200 pound-feet of torque is 20 psi. Jump in here and call 275 pound-feet of torque. Flash that to your computer. That will give you the ability to curve your boost pressure. It's literally that simple. It is a couple different steps. You will you will have to drive the car, boost the car, and then adjust as necessary. Looking at it in a data log, you're going to see this blue line is the actuation of the wastegate. The brown line is your map. And then your green line is your RPM. As you can see, the map pressure came up, the wastegate solenoid opened up, bypassed air. Once we hit 40 psi, or 43.5 psi, which is pretty much the edge of a 3-bar map sensor that this car has, you can see where the wastegate started to close down. It actually flatlines at 34.22. And it holds that until 6,300 RPM. Pretty much the end of this pull. But it starts to drop in order to hold boost pressure at the end of, at almost 7,000 RPM. Kind of a backstory of this data log. This is a SRT4 with a 50 trim turbo with a relatively small AR exhaust housing, so it spools up really, really fast. But in order to hold that RPM to the end, it needs a little bit of coaxing. And that's where you see where we've tuned the wastegate control to have less, less control over the wastegate itself in order to build that boost curve. So it's very possible. It is actually relatively easy. There's just a lot of steps to it. Going out, boosting, varying your wastegate control a little bit at a time until you get where you need to be. And literally just use the block. Use a block. Go from bottom to top. Yes, you can fine tune it from there, but in order to keep it simple for this video, use a block. Block it out by RPM. And then fine tune with your turbo desired torque table. And then from there, you can go back and build yourself something by gear or by vehicle speed. And you're not limited to 30 miles per hour. You open this guy up, you can make that 120. Oh my goodness. 120 miles per hour. You can turn this one to 80 miles per hour. So you can literally tailor yourself a curve for the turbo. It's just going to take a few steps, and it's very possible. But it is actually quite a bit easier than you would have thought. So give me some feedback. Tell me what you think. If you have any questions, be sure to leave them below. I'll be more than glad to answer them. If you think I'm completely wrong, let me know. Subscribe. Give me some love. Tell me what videos you want to see on tuning. I'll get to them. For now, this is Tactical Pontoon signing out.